So my name's Cassie. I decided to pick brain cells in chapter 2 and constancy in chapter 3. So for talking about brain cells, it's a lot of definitions and a lot of biology, and we could go into that, but I would just be telling you definitions. So just hopefully you've read the chapter. I guess memorize those for quizzes maybe. It did give an example of how the brain is affected. It talks about how alcohol affects the brain. Of course, there's lots of examples of that and various drugs and how they affect brains. That to me almost seems like a better way of studying how the brain works, is how things inhibit it in certain ways. It talked about, just as far as the structure of brain cells, the whole structure of it. In my opinion, it's almost better to kind of understand like how these things don't work sometimes in order to kind of grasp how they should normally function. So like an example would be like multiple sclerosis is when the myelin sheath is kind of deteriorated or damaged, and then that can affect the body as far as transmitting information, because that's how information is transmitted to various parts of the body. So yeah, sorry, I don't have a ton of input to say about that chapter. There was a lot about coding and how your brain codes information, as far as like just lifting your hand up, like how does your brain decide to do that? So it talked a little bit about that and how it's either specific neurons are used in a consistent pattern over and over again, and that's how the information is transmitted, or it's certain neurons firing while certain ones aren't, maybe some are like half firing. And it talks about how both of these systems are used in our brain to transmit information. So that's coding. There's pattern coding, which is like you need to pick up your drink, so your brain sends information to your hand to pick up the drink, and then your hand does it. So that's the pattern that your brain follows. It's of course much more in-depth than that, but this isn't biology. So just read that chapter and I guess memorize the definitions. So down to constancy. So while I was reading this part of our chapters, all I could think of was art. So I'm an artist, I paint. And constancy, reading through here, is basically the definition of being able to make something look like what it is. So recognizing like the size of an object, the brightness or the not brightness of an object, the shape of that object. This is all what it takes to make art that looks like people, and make it actually recognizable. And I found it very interesting that basically if you can grasp the concept of constancy, you could like draw pretty good, I guess. Maybe not, maybe that takes time, but it also talked a lot about like how we use depth to recognize constancy and the size of things. It talked about Hermann von Helmholtz, who did experiments with depth and changing that depth to kind of see, like, do humans use this? Do they not? They change the size in order to like play with those metrics. And it turns out we do use depth a lot to recognize like what things are and how they relate to us as far as size. I also thought while I was reading through this about the whole the dress thing. I don't remember when it was, like a year or two ago, but the color changing dress thing. It talked about illusions in this third chapter. It's kind of like that, but it's more constancy, where the reason that you're seeing the change in color is because your brain is either acknowledging that like it's in light or it's in shade, That's the only difference really between those. Let me just pull up a picture of it so I actually know what I'm talking about. Was it dress or was it shoes? Oh yeah. So I see white and gold, but apparently other people were seeing black and white. I don't know. There was a couple of them that came out. But it's just your brain trying to correlate colors with each other based on if your brain is seeing this in like a well-lit space or a darker space, which is what chapter 3 talked about a lot. Just as an artist, let's see. So there was an illustration in the chapter about the checkerboard with the light being cast on different colored squares. This is what that whole dress thing is about. It's just your brain perceiving different depths of color and light. So, yeah, so I found the information about constancy interesting just because I use it when I draw. Like, imagine somebody like stretching their arm out to you and you trying to have to draw that from like a foreshortened perspective. It's really hard to do that without an example because your brain knows what an arm looks like. It looks like, like a cylinder with a hand at the end of it, I guess. So for your brain to be able to foreshorten that without seeing that happening is really hard unless you've practiced that skill and you've observed it a lot, which a lot of people don't do. But that's just something your brain just can't make it up. Which is why a lot of artists will use references for stuff, just because unless you've had a lot of experience with that kind of stuff, it's just really hard to do. But anyways, that's what I thought of these chapters. I can't wait to watch the other couple videos that hopefully will come out soon.